Imagine having to choose between annihilating everything you love to protect what you believe in. An unthinkable act, an unimaginable pain. In Naruto, one of the most complex characters in anime history did exactly that, and his story will flip your perception of hero and villain upside down. Get ready to dive into the mind of a ninja who hid a devastating secret for years, bearing the weight of a decision that changed the fate of an entire clan. At the heart of the thriving Hidden Leaf village Konoha, the Uchiha clan was a force to be reckoned with, revered for their strength and the Sharingan bloodline, but also increasingly eyed with suspicion by the village leaders. It was a time of apparent peace, but beneath the surface, the seeds of distrust and discontent were already sown, slowly germinating in fertile ground for conflict. It is in this complex scenario of political intrigue and social tension that we are introduced to Itachi Uchiha, a young man who stood out not only for his exceptional talent on the battlefield, but for a sharp mind and a sense of responsibility far beyond his years. He was a prodigy, a genius, but with a soul that seemed to carry the weight of the world. From childhood, Itachi displayed a precocious maturity, a deep aversion to any form of conflict, and a burning desire to preserve the peace that had cost so much to achieve after eras of war. He observed with concern how the relationship between his clan and the rest of Konoha deteriorated, serving, at times, as a tenuous link between the Uchiha leaders and the village elders, trying in vain to mediate the inevitable. The Uchiha, who had played a fundamental role in Konoha's founding alongside the Senju clan, felt progressively marginalized and disrespected, living in a state of paranoia and resentment that evolved into a latent desire for armed rebellion. They saw a coup as the only way to reclaim their rightful place. Itachi, with his keen intelligence and an almost premonitory ability to anticipate future scenarios and their consequences, witnessed firsthand the escalation of this animosity, knowing it could only end in tragedy. From a psychological standpoint, Itachi exhibited traits of an altruistic and, notably, utilitarian personality from a very young age, a mind that calculated the greatest good for the greatest number of people. He did not act on impulse or selfishness. Every one of his actions was carefully weighed based on its potential impact on the community as a whole, like a complex puzzle of sacrifices and gains. He sought the most efficient solution for the least global suffering, a principle that would guide his most difficult and darkest choices. His analytical mind, combined with a deep empathy for the innocents who would be affected by the war, would lead him to a brutal crossroads, one that few could even conceive, given its cruelty. The future of the village depended on an unthinkable decision, a burden only he would be able to bear. But there was something no one saw coming, a truth hidden beneath the surface of apparent betrayal. The trigger that precipitated Itachi's drastic and irreversible transformation was the imminent and, at that point, inevitable rebellion of the Uchiha clan against the Hidden Leaf village. The conspiracy was already at an advanced stage, with the clan, led by his own father, Fugaku Uchiha, determined to execute a coup d'etat to seize control of Konoha, no matter the cost. The prospect of a full-scale civil war, which would not only decimate his own clan but also drag the entire village into a bloody and indiscriminate conflict, destroying generations and claiming countless innocent lives, was simply an unacceptable scenario for Itachi, an indelible stain on the peace he so cherished. It was at this critical moment of despair and impending catastrophe that Konoha's leaders, aware of Itachi's unwavering loyalty to the village and his unparalleled ninja abilities, presented him with a dreadful choice: act alone to stop the rebellion, no matter the cost in lives and morality, or witness the mutual annihilation of his clan and the village he swore to protect with his own life. This was the definitive rupture of his soul. Itachi was forced to confront the reality of a chaotic and violent future, and the idea of a conflict that could escalate into a new great ninja war, dragging the entire world into barbarity, was unbearable for him, a vision that haunted him. The internal conflict was excruciating and deterrent. On one side, his undeniable loyalty to his family, his Uchiha blood, and his cultural and historical roots. On the other, his unconditional devotion to the peace, security, and stability of Konoha, the home he also loved. Psychology would explain this transformation as a classic and brutal example of an extreme moral dilemma, where the individual is forced to choose between two equally terrible options, each requiring an immense personal and emotional sacrifice, a pain that transcends understanding. The unbearable psychological pressure, the solitude of the decision, and the urgent need to make a choice that would seal the fate of thousands pushed him onto a dark and solitary path, from which there was no return. Innocence was lost forever, and pain became his sole and constant companion. And it was there that everything began to crumble, not just in Konoha, but within Itachi himself, leaving only ashes in his wake. With the agonizing and irreversible decision made, Itachi's mind began to mold itself to a new and terrible reality, one that would demand of him a mental and emotional strength few human beings could even imagine. He accepted the mission to eliminate his clan to prevent a catastrophic war, but he did so on one single, desperate condition: a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness. His younger brother, Sasuke, must be spared at all costs. This was the only sliver of hope he had left, the only vestige of his unconditional love that he allowed to remain intact amidst the darkness, a flickering flame in a sea of shadows. To the world, Itachi instantly transformed into a traitor, a cold-blooded, heartless killer, a monster who annihilated his own family without remorse. Within his mind, however, he was performing an act of supreme sacrifice, a burden he would carry alone for all eternity, knowing he would never be understood or forgiven. The facts and attitudes that reveal this new and terrible way of thinking, this carefully constructed villainous persona, include the way he behaved immediately after the massacre and in the years that followed. He joined the Akatsuki, a sinister organization known for its destructive intentions and for harboring high-ranking ninjas with fearsome reputations and dark pasts. This adhesion was not random. It served as a perfect facade for his role as a dangerous criminal, allowing him to operate in the shadows, secretly monitor Konoha's activities, and silently act to protect it from external threats, intercepting plans and providing crucial information without anyone knowing. His cold calculation, his apparent indifference, and, especially, the cruel and deliberate way he manipulated Sasuke into hating him deeply, all were part of a meticulous and painful plan. Itachi needed Sasuke to become strong enough to eventually confront him and, ultimately, to become Konoha's hero, the protector of the village that he openly could not be. Psychologically, this construction of an external persona that brutally contrasted with his true intentions is a remarkable example of dissociation and emotional masking to an extreme, almost pathological, degree. Itachi created a character for the world, a feared and hated villain, while his true pain, his noble motives, and his unconditional love for Sasuke remained hidden, buried beneath layers of suffering, secrecy, and self-imposed guilt. He lived a life of disguise, where every action, every word, every glance was a carefully calculated step towards his ultimate goal, Konoha's redemption through his own sacrifice. But the true monster, in the eyes of the world, was still dormant, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. The ultimate act of transgression, the peak of Itachi's decision, and the event that would forever brand him as an outcast, was the extermination of his own clan. On that fateful night, under the moonlight and the scarlet glow of his Sharingan, with the exception of Sasuke, he eliminated every member of his family, his friends, and everyone he had known since childhood, fulfilling the order imposed by Konoha's leaders to prevent a full-scale civil war that would have catastrophic consequences for the entire land of fire and potentially for the entire ninja world. This was the point of no return, the moment Itachi sealed his fate as a murderer, a traitor, and a monster in everyone's eyes, taking upon himself all the guilt, hatred, and condemnation that would follow. His worldview, already peculiar and focused on the greater good, completely transformed after this traumatic event. For him, individual sacrifice, no matter how brutal and painful it was on a personal level, was entirely justifiable if it guaranteed peace and stability for an infinitely greater number of people. The pain of a minority, even if it was his own and that of his family, was a price he was willing to pay to save the lives of many. The morality and ethics of his actions are a minefield of philosophical dilemmas where right and wrong intertwine in shades of gray. Itachi believed, with unwavering and ironclad conviction, that the life of an entire clan, consumed by rebellion and hatred, was an acceptable and even necessary price to preserve the lives of millions of Konoha citizens and, more broadly, to prevent a war that could spread throughout the ninja world, claiming countless innocent lives. He rationalized his act not as intrinsic evil or sadism, but as a cruel necessity, an inevitable decision to prevent an even greater evil, a catastrophe he clearly saw approaching. This is the essence of moral utilitarianism in its most extreme form, the belief that the most ethical action, the rightest decision, is the one that maximizes well-being and minimizes suffering for the greatest number of people, even if it requires a terrible personal sacrifice, an indelible stain on his soul. The viewer is led to a disturbing and agonizing dilemma. What if he was right? Is it possible that such a terrible, shocking, and inhuman act could, through certain lenses, be an act of distorted heroism, a sacrifice misunderstood in its magnitude and depth? What is the limit to sacrifice in the name of a greater good? And, more importantly, who has the right to judge the weight of such an unbearable choice, a burden almost no one else could carry? Delving deeper into Itachi's complex psychological analysis, we realize that his behavior, although initially shocking and difficult for most to comprehend, makes a terrifying sense within his own internal logic and his unique moral code. Itachi clearly exhibits traits of an individual with an extremely high orientation towards justice and order, almost bordering on rigidity. His moral code, although it may seem distorted and even inhuman at first glance, after all, the murder of his own family is something that deeply offends sensibility, is surprisingly consistent with his unwavering belief that Konoha's stability was the ultimate and non-negotiable priority above any personal, emotional, or familial ties. For him, the collective absolutely outweighed the individual. We can draw striking parallels with the philosophical concept of tragic choice, a dilemma where an individual is forced to select the least catastrophic option among equally terrible and desolate alternatives, each with an unbearable human cost. In terms of social psychology, the pressure to prevent a mass conflict, a devastating war that would claim countless innocent lives and destabilize the ninja world, can, in fact, lead to decisions that, individually, would be considered unthinkable, morally abominable, and cruel. Itachi's apparent coldness during and after the massacre can be interpreted not as an absence of feelings — he felt every death — but as an extreme psychological defense mechanism, a necessary and self-imposed emotional numbing to carry out such a painful and inhuman task. He took no pleasure in what he did. On the contrary, he carried excruciating pain and deep remorse. But this pain was endured and contained for the sake of a goal he considered greater and more vital than his own existence or happiness. Comparing him to other fictional characters who acted for a greater good through questionable and unethical means, such as Ozymandias in Watchmen, who sacrificed millions to prevent a nuclear war, or certain morally ambiguous choices by Commander Shepard in Mass Effect, Itachi embodies the idea that the path to good can be paved with devastating decisions and sacrifices that most people would never be able to bear or comprehend. His story forces us to confront the idea that heroism may not be glorious and evident, but rather hidden, painfully self-sacrificing, and misunderstood. A solitary burden carried in the deepest shadows. It wasn't madness. It was cold calculation, but done with a shattered heart and a tormented soul. What remains after the devastation wrought by Itachi Uchiha is a complex, painful, and for a long time, completely misunderstood legacy shrouded in mystery and hatred. To the ninja world, Itachi was a hunted criminal, an infamous traitor, considered one of Konoha's greatest enemies and a heartless murderer who massacred his own family for power. However, his singular and drastic decision shaped the world in ways no one, except him, could have foreseen. Peace in Konoha, though fragile and under the shadow of his supposed betrayal, was maintained, and the great ninja war he so feared, though inevitable in the future, was postponed for years, providing precious time for new generations of ninjas to grow, train, and prepare for the challenges to come. The consequences of his actions resonated throughout the Naruto storyline, serving as the primary catalyst that propelled Sasuke's journey of revenge and quest for power, his younger brother. Ironically, Itachi's manipulation of Sasuke to hate him and seek his destruction ultimately culminated in the eventual and shocking discovery of the truth behind the massacre and the villain, revealing the complexity of his mission and the profound love he harbored for his brother. The lie he built for himself crumbled, exposing the supreme sacrifice. This story raises a profound philosophical and moral reflection. Who are we, mere observers, to judge an individual who, in the face of an impossible dilemma, chose the path that, for him, represented the lesser loss for the majority, a lesser evil to prevent a total catastrophe and unprecedented carnage? Itachi's life is a dark and powerful reminder that not all sacrifices are seen, understood, or applauded. On the contrary, the greatest acts of altruism and self-sacrifice can easily be mistaken for the vilest acts of betrayal and cruelty, condemning the individual to ostracism and public hatred. Itachi carried his burden in silence, living with everyone's condemnation, accepting being hated, patiently waiting to be judged, and, eventually, stopped by his brother. His ultimate goal was for Sasuke to become strong enough to surpass him, which would allow him to finally die at the hands of his beloved brother, completing his plan of redemption for Konoha and giving purpose to Sasuke's life. His existence was a continuous sacrifice, a lifetime of lies, disguises, and excruciating pain for the sake of a greater good. His death for him was liberation and the culmination of his mission. But perhaps he was not the last to make such a heavy sacrifice, a silent whisper that the true nature of heroism can be hidden in the deepest shadows, never to be fully understood. Itachi Uchiha's story is a disturbing reminder that heroism doesn't always wear the cape of glory. Sometimes it hides in the darkness, taking on the role of a villain to protect the light. His journey is a testament to the complexity of the human mind and the limits of morality when faced with impossible choices. He was a man who chose to bear the weight of the world, embracing pain and condemnation to protect those he loved and the peace he so cherished. The question remains, how far would you go to prevent chaos, even if it meant becoming the very monster you fear?